How's it going, everybody? My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussey's Huddle. In this video, I'm going to talk about the curse of the Canadian quarterback in the CFL and why it persists to this day, and whether or not we're any closer to seeing a full-time Canadian starting quarterback in the CFL. But really quickly before we get started, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting that like button or subscribing to Hussey's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. We're on the road to 100 subscribers, just crossed 60 the other day, and I appreciate everyone's support for watching these videos. It really means a lot to me. And with that said, let's get started. When I first started following the CFL as a kid in the mid-2000s, quarterbacks such as Damon Allen and Anthony Calvillo graced the field, dominating the CFL with completely different skill sets. A young me then began to wonder, were there any Canadian-born starting quarterbacks in the CFL? Not only did I discover that the answer was no, I discovered that it had been like that for an extremely long time. It was then that I researched the last and perhaps the only true starting Canadian passer to play in the CFL. Russ Jackson. Jackson played 12 seasons for the Ottawa Rough Riders after being selected in the first round out of McMaster in 1958. He would go on to capture 3 Grey Cups in Ottawa, along with 3 All-Star appearances, until his retirement in 1969. His retirement would, in hindsight, cast a curse over the league that persists to this day. Of course, after discovering this curse of the Canadian quarterback, I, like many other Canadian football fans, was always in search of someone who could break the mold. The first one that I can remember myself getting excited about was Brad Sinopoli, who came out of Ottawa in 2010 after capturing the Het Creighton Trophy as the MVP of U Sports. While Sinopoli was given by all accounts a fair shake as a passer, even making the Stampeders roster as a listed quarterback, eventually he would transition over to receiver, which really proved to be a smart career choice for him. Another was McMaster quarterback Kyle Quinlan, who made waves after leading the McMaster Marauders to their first Vanier Cup victory in decades in 2011 over the continual powerhouse Laval Rouge et Or. As someone that is from Hamilton, my hype and expectations for Quinlan rose to unrealistic levels. And though he would sign a CFL contract with Montreal, he wouldn't see past his first training camp in the league. Finally, there was Brandon Bridge. Bridge was the guy I had the most faith in to finally break the curse and become a CFL quarterback. He received an invite to minicamp with the Dallas Cowboys, but not long after would make his way north to the CFL. Bridge would establish himself as a capable backup who became the first Canadian quarterback to start and win a game in the league since Jackson in the 1960s. However, after bouncing around the league for 5 seasons and never securing a full-time starting job, Bridge opted to retire to join the Peel Police Department in 2020. Many of you diehard CFL fans might think I'm forgetting about somebody, and that player is Andrew Buckley, who was twice a Het Creighton Award winner, who ascended to the backup job with the Calgary Stampeders by 2017, but opted to walk away from the game in 2018 to pursue a medical degree. I mentioned Buckley last because even though his CFL career never reached the highest highs, I think his situation represents the best template for success for a Canadian quarterback in the CFL. Which brings us to 2021, where we have 2 promising quarterback prospects in Michael O'Connor and Nathan Rourke. O'Connor was a heavily recruited prospect out of high school, originally redshirting a year at Penn State before opting to transfer to UBC in 2015, where he immediately led the team to a Vanier Cup championship. After playing out his career with the Thunderbirds, O'Connor would be selected in the 3rd round of the 2019 CFL draft by Toronto. As a rookie, he was buried on the depth chart for most of the season, but received a half's worth of playing time in the season finale, where he looked the part and even threw his first career CFL touchdown pass. Due to the CFL's cancelled 2020 season, O'Connor would not see the 2nd season of his rookie contract and was a free agent this offseason. Last week, he landed with the Calgary Stampeders, a team where he will presumably battle Dakota Prukop for the number 2 job. Rourke, on the other hand, took another route to the CFL, growing up in Oakville but deciding to transfer to a high school in Alabama in order to receive more attention from recruiters. He eventually received an offer to play at the University of Ohio, where he would go on to become one of the most accomplished quarterbacks in school history. In 2020, many thought he would at least receive an invite to an NFL training camp, but that never came about. In the CFL draft, however, Rourke would be selected in the 2nd round, 15th overall, by the Lions, becoming one of the highest drafted quarterbacks in the event's history. Rourke, too, looks to be in the mix for a reserve backup role in BC, but that competition appears to be less defined at this point than the situation O'Connor is in with Calgary. O'Connor and Rourke are two of the best prospects Canada has produced in years at the quarterback position. But are we still any closer to seeing a full-fledged starting quarterback in the CFL who's a Canadian? My answer to this question is yes, depending on the circumstances for growth. There are a few variables in my mind that we should consider when answering this question. Number one is that CFL quarterback talent is much deeper than we realize, and starting spots are at a premium in the CFL. I mean, there's only 9 of them. Just looking at the stars around the CFL, it is very rare that a player comes to the league and within his first few seasons takes hold of a starting job. Typically, CFL QBs have to pay their dues as backups, sometimes for years. One example of this is a guy like Cody Fajardo of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who spent many years as a CFL backup before finally getting the chance to be that guy in Saskatchewan due to an injury, of all things. And a guy like Vernon Adams, who also had to fight through years of being a backup before he even got a chance to start for Montreal. It's important to remember that O'Connor and Rourke likely won't have the opportunity to start for years, and that is perfectly customary for the CFL in a league where there's only so many opportunities to start. You just have to wait your turn in this league. We have to keep that in mind when measuring our expectations for these players going forward. The second thing is Rourke and O'Connor need to land in spots where they are given fair shakes to compete for practice reps. This shouldn't be a problem in Calgary for O'Connor with how Buckley was given the chance to mold into the team's primary backup over the course of a few years, working his way to actually see some playing time on the field with that team. But in BC, it's a little less simple. You'd think since BC invested a relatively high draft pick on Rourke, this wouldn't be an issue. But I was listening to TSN's Farhan Lalji appear on a podcast recently, where he described just how rampant the bias is against Canadian quarterbacks in the CFL, even pointing to BC under former head coach / GM Wally Buono as a specific example. Buono is no longer part of the decision-making process in BC, but it is concerning nonetheless that someone as connected to the league as Farhan would feel the need to shine some lights on the preconceived biases against the ability of Canadian quarterbacks coming into the CFL. Which brings me to my final point and perhaps the most important aspect to answering the title of this video. What extent is the league willing to go to promote Canadian quarterbacks? I've always thought that the league was missing out on extensive marketing potential because of the lack of Canadian stars at the sport's most important position. And in a way, the league has all but tried to do the opposite, with the biggest example of this being that quarterbacks do not count towards the league's ratio rules. A simple change to this would be to include a designated spot for a Canadian quarterback on every roster. But this too raises questions about the quality and the amount of quality prospects available to teams. Regardless, the league could afford to do more in terms of advancing Canadian quarterbacks in the talent pipeline. Then, maybe one day, we'll see another Canadian quarterback like Russ Jackson on a CFL field.